All right. Welcome to chapter 4, The Dark Night of Infidelity. So now we're going to be entering into a very dark chapter in the Song of Songs, into the life of the Shulamite. And, it always makes me smile when I see people reading the Song of Songs as a kind of ideal relationship. Um, it's a text that is often read during weddings. Um, and we don't often read the Song of Songs really as it has been written. We don't really pay attention to some of these very painful moments in the journey between, of this woman towards this man. And so, but like I said, in my very first introduction, the Song of Songs is a book written for real women and real men. This is not an idealized how things should be, this is how the Garden of Eden. No, we are in a story which is really written for real people who struggle in the real world. And nevertheless, in spite of, this harsh reality that we often find ourselves in, gives us wisdom, gives us a new light, how to orient ourselves in these difficult times, how to navigate these dark chapters of our relationship. So there's so of course we're going to have to deal with that issue of infidelity, and of course address it and see what is the biblical, or at least in this particular context, what does our story have to say about it, um, which we'll see is very interesting. Now, infidelity for me is the worst thing that can happen. I prefer my partner dies than cheats on me. It's infidelity is really it's a rupture of the bond. And it's a rupture which, by the way, um, at that moment it becomes acceptable to divorce. This is the only exception that in the Gospels, when Jesus is teaching about divorce, he says, no, don't divorce, you can't divorce. But if there is infidelity, yes, you can divorce. So this is the only time which is really sanctioned by the Bible for separation. It is a rupture which very often seems irreparable, cannot repair something like that. And also it seems in many cases unforgivable, especially if it is constantly being repeated. So it's really not many of us survive this. Not many of us navigate this well. And I've noticed two different approaches to it. Doesn't even have to be infidelity. It can be just the guy still, focused on other women. He's dating you, but he's also keeping his options open, right? On Facebook, he's still single. Or he's still, checking the apps occasionally. So it can be, mild infidelity or, deep infidelity. In any case, there's usually two reactions that I've noticed in myself and in other women. First reaction, the woman panics. She gets into control mode, begins to, investigate, wants to know exactly what's happening, begins to, check his phone, find out what's happening. And of course, it's important to find out what's happening. But, trust me, you'll find out. You don't need to look. You'll find out. It'll come to you. So we get very controlling. We get very anxious. And then, of course, we have a meltdown. And at that point, things can get very violent verbally. We can, throw the person out. We can be like, the hell with you. Or we can, plead for them to stay with us, or we can become extremely emotional, which men love, of course. That's the first reaction. The second reaction is uh, much more dangerous. The woman becomes very quiet. This is much more dangerous than the woman who blows up. Because if she becomes quiet, that means she's left you. She's left you internally and will eventually leave externally. This is the woman who will then shut down her heart and never look back. So that's the second reaction, right? First reaction, you're trying to still, hold on to this guy, make him stay, yell at him for doing this. The second reaction is there is no point of return. It's over. You did this, it's over. I'm out, right? Now, what's interesting is that the Shulamite shows us not a middle way, but a third path. And that's what I'm interested in, right? For those of us want, who long for the relationship to be salvaged without losing our dignity, there is a third path, right? And again, this is a choice, right? This third path is not prescriptive. Nothing in the Song of Songs is prescriptive. You don't have to do anything that the Song of Songs is advising. Song of Songs is just opening doors. And you decide if it's the right person or the right time to walk through them. This is a choice you have to make. But what the Shulamit is going to reveal to us is that there is a third path. There is a third way. There is a way to navigate this. There is a door. And so for those of us who are interested in this door, let us now go deeper into the story. So the story begins well, as all love stories do, with the man, giving her a kind of a pet name, like a name, like he's calling her his lily. And I quote here, like a lily among the thorns is my beloved among the maidens. So here you can see that the man is completely into her. He doesn't even see the other women. And this is often the case, right? When the relationship begins, that man will not see another woman. And the woman also, she will be blinded to the other man. They will only see each other. What sadly happens after a few years or months even is that, the interest wanes, the person is less exciting, and you start to notice, oh, this exciting prospect and this possibility over here. And you start to, again, start to check out what the Song of Songs will call the other lilies. So in the Song of Songs, you have a moment where the man begins to turn his attention away from his beloved towards the field of possibilities that still exists out there. So let's look at our text, because we have this happening. We have a progression happening in three moments. It's like a symphony with three movements. So let us look at the first moment of potential infidelity. So in chapter 2, verse 6, we have the woman, still very much into her man, saying, my beloved is mine and I am his. And then we have this extra little footnote where it says, and he browses among the lilies. So it's like at first, when I was still young and naive, when I read this passage, I'll be like, oh, that's sweet. He's in the lilies. He's in a field of lilies, probably cutting, gathering up lilies to offer her. And it took a man to show me that this is not what was happening. I read this once in the company of a male friend of mine, and he was like, oh. And I'm like, what? Oh. He's like, do you don't see what's happening? And I'm like, no, what's happening? And he's like, he's looking at other women. And at that moment, my whole universe crashed down. I realized, oh my goodness, that's true, right? Now we have the plural. He called her my lily, and now he's clearly browsing among the lilies. So this is the first instance we have this potential or maybe actual infidelity. This is the moment when the guy, is starting to lose interest a little bit, starting to check out other women, or maybe even, having some affair. But in any case, there are other lilies in the picture. Second moment we have a few chapters later, very similar, chapter 6, verse 3. It's a little different, the formulation, but the same situation. This time the woman is saying, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. And then again you look, and he is there browsing among the lilies. So the lilies are still there. And then you get to the third moment, which is in chapter 7, verse 10. And there she's still saying, I am my beloved's, and so forth. But at that moment, when we look to see what the man is doing, there are no more lilies. And instead, the text says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. In other words, and by the way, the Hebrew word there for desire, the word teshukah, is actually a very powerful word. It implies the idea of returning, of turning back towards. It also implies the idea of very strong focus. There is nothing else in the periphery. Everything is going in that direction. So we're talking here about a passionate return, everything, a strong, focused intention of love and desire. So it's a very powerful moment. So clearly, at the end of this difficult and painful journey where the man was either thinking about or committing infidelity, somehow he has made his way back to her. And of course, the $1 million question is, how? What did she do? How did she do it? Is there something that she did? Is there a way that she positioned herself for him to eventually make his way back to her? And the good news is, yes, there is something that she did. It's very subtle, and we're going to examine it right now. So, good news to all of us who have or are or will experience infidelity. There is a way through this. If we choose it, of course. It's not an easy path, but there is a path. And that's what the Shulamit is about to reveal to us. So let us go into the text and look at the details. So I hope you have the text in front of you. Let me repeat it. Chapter 2, verse 6, my beloved is mine and I am his, lilies. Chapter 6, verse 3, I am my beloved's and he's mine, lilies. Chapter 7, verse 10, I am my beloved's and his desire is for me. So there's a subtle shift going on. And the first thing we see is that there is a consistency on the part of the woman. She doesn't budge. He's in the lilies, he's not in the lilies, he's in and out of the lilies. She is always in the same position. My beloved is mine and I am his. I am my beloved's and he's mine. I am my beloved's, right? There is a consistency. Now, this is the first thing that we ought to learn when we are dealing with something like this. First thing the Shulamit does is she stays the course. She doesn't budge. She doesn't move. She remains, in other words, faithful to her desire. She remains faithful to who she is. You're going to do all of this. I'm going to be me. I've chosen to love you. I'm not budging. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're in and out. I am going to remain faithful to who I am, to my commitment to you, to what I have decided to do, to my desire towards you. And so we have this first move on her part of really remaining grounded, not moving. In other words, she's entering here a place of deep stillness. She's not going to take action. She remains exactly where she is. There's a proverb that says, when you're lost, stay where you are, right? Eventually someone will find you. But if you're over there trying to find, you're not going to make it. And so what the Shulamit does is she really enters a place of deep rest. I'm not moving. I'm not going to allow whatever is happening to change who I am, the commitment that I have made. I'm going to stay the course. Now, this is not enough. Because at that point, this can also become asphyxiating. The guy he wants out, and here you are. So staying the course doesn't mean hanging on to the relationship or hanging on to that man. The second thing she does is she lets him go. Look at where she does this. She begins, my beloved is mine. And then she says, chapter 6, verse 3, I am my beloved's. In other words, she sets him free. It's no more my beloved is mine. It's I am yours. I am my beloved's. And so at the same time that she remains true to her desire and to her vision for the relationship, remember, desire is vision. Desire is wisdom. If you're sensing that there's potential here, that this man might very well be your soulmate, staying the course is the first thing to do. But at the same time, one has to also let him go. At this moment, you are recreating the distance necessary for the rekindling of desire on his part. Remember, seductiveness is the product of desire and distance. By staying the course, you honor your desire. By releasing him, you create the distance. And now it is really up to him whether he wants to journey back to you or not. There's a beautiful proverb, which we all know, right? If you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it is yours. If it doesn't, it was never meant to be. At this moment, you are giving the relationship the potential for a new beginning. You're creating the space for desire to be kindled again. That's the second thing that has to happen when you're dealing with infidelity. Finally, what we realize is what comes out of this letting go and releasing of the other person is you recover your I as a woman. I am my beloved's. This I that had been lost somewhere in the relationship. Many, many times, infidelity comes when one of the partners has merged into the other, where one of the partners has stopped existing. And you have to ask yourself, as you're releasing that person and recovering your I, where was I this whole time? How much have I sacrificed of my integrity, of my desires, of my true self in this relationship. It can be very well the case that the love has died because you have died. And so it is very important at this moment, in the context of the darkest context of your relationship, to recover your I, to recover who I have lost myself. Let me find myself again. Let me again cherish my desires, reconnect with my friends, with my dreams, with my aspirations, find my integrity again. And this, in a way, is extremely powerful also because you lost yourself, you lost the man. As you begin to regain yourself, this is creating again the potential for desirability. You become again desirable when you're again yourself, right? And it is precisely then, once that woman has repositioned herself, she has stayed the course, she has let him go, she has recovered her I, it is at that moment that the man in our story makes his way back to her. So now I want to be clear. This is not a recipe for success, right? This is not something you have to do. Again, this is a door. You can walk through it or not. You have to reconnect. Do I want this? Do I truly want this? Right? If you do, there is a path, right? But it's not a foolproof path. This is not going to ensure that every man comes back because remember, seductiveness has to do with respect, with the respect of the man's agency, of the man's freedom. You can't force someone to commit to you. You can't force someone to be faithful to you. You can only create the best conditions of possibility for that man to return. It doesn't mean he will, but there is something you can do to open up that space, to open up that possibility, to open up that door. And too often we ruin that, right? We become hysterical and we throw the man out, or we close our hearts and we in a way we close that door. But there is a way to keep that door open, to allow, to create the conditions of possibility for his return, should we choose to again, right? So what the Shulamit is teaching us is the best thing we can do, the best way we can position ourselves if we do want to give a chance for our relationship. And recovering the I entails also taking time to heal, perhaps separating oneself. It's very important sometimes in these moments where the pain is so unbearable to take a step back, to separate, so that you can heal, so that you can and also eventually give praise, recover this joy that you once had, this light that you once, reconnect to the heart. Remember, that is the secret of seductiveness. So that's what we are learning here in our story. Now, the question I get all the time when I'm teaching this particular chapter is, well, how long are we supposed to wait for this guy, right? Am I not going to waste, how many years of my life I got to waste on this, right? And I have two answers for that, finally. Usually, back in the day, I would be taken by surprise. I'd be like, well, I don't know. How long do you wait? But now I think I've thought about it, and there's two answers that come to mind. Number one, there is always a risk in creating intimacy. Love is always a risk. There's always the risk of waiting for nothing. That's the price, really, of love. So, to a certain degree, we have to be willing and able to pay the price for intimacy. The wait is what can make intimacy happen, a deeper intimacy, right? The ability to navigate this infidelity, the ability to heal and to allow for a new beginning is difficult. It takes time. It's a risk, but it's really the only way that the next level can be possible. I tell students, aren't you curious? Right? Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's a possible waste of time, but aren't you curious to see what might be at the other end, at the other side of your wait? Imagine if we never went through the winter, how would we ever taste the spring? So that's the thing. The first thing I tell students is there is a risk. Of course, there is a risk. But aren't you even curious to know what might happen if you did stand your ground here? The second thing I say is it's not about expecting a result. right? When you wait with the expectation of a result, it becomes very, very frustrating because you're like, I'm waiting and nothing is happening and I am wasting time, right? It's not that at all. What the Shulamit is doing here when she stands her ground is not necessarily waiting indefinitely for this particular man. She is simply keeping herself open. It's a way to keep the heart open for what might come. Right. And so she's able to be open not only to other possibilities, but even this man could potentially come back and she would be ready. So it's not so much about control here. It's about openness. I am going to stand my ground. I believe in love. I let you go. And I'm able to do the work to heal, to process, to give grace so that I can be so that my heart can remain open for whatever life is going to bring into my space next, right? It is an availability, an openness. In Hebrew, we say hineni, here I am, right? It is the ability to remain open for whatever is going to now come into my life. And I'm able to be open even to your return, right? That is what she's doing. So this is freeing, actually. This is not something that will imprison us. This is not a waiting with to wait with expectation of something precise. That's frustrating. That's imprisoning. But to wait with an open heart for come what may, for what life is going to bring, is really what we're talking about here in terms of something that is freeing rather than something that will shackle you. So that's really what the Shulamit is teaching us. And again, I want to emphasize this is not something that we have to do. This is something that we can choose to do if we think that the relationship is worth it. And it is, in a way, it's not foolproof. There is no 100% success rate, but it is really the best way. This is what will create the best conditions of possibility for a potential renewal. The renewal of the relationship, but also making sure that time is given for the renewal of the heart. So, okay, now we are going to move on to the next chapter, which is a chapter about boundaries. So I look forward to this. It will be called A Room of Her Own, and it's coming up next. I'll see you soon.